Welcome to the Central Connection podcast. It is an absolute honor to be sitting across from Leslie Shalabi, more known locally from Convivium, but I'm going to just geek out on you for a minute. I've known Leslie, I don't even know how long, but maybe 6 or 7 years, and just fallen in love with your mission and everything you're doing with what I've known you for is Convivium, and the group of friends that we have in common. But even just in getting to know you, I only got surface level, and you and David got together and talked, and just to even get to know more about you. I didn't realize you were from Wisconsin, small town, which I actually ran my first, a half marathon up there.
Cool.
The Cow Chip Classic, where they throw.
Yes.
So this is Prairie to Sac.
That's my hometown. Yep.
That's your hometown. So anyway, I can't say enough good things about Leslie and what you're doing in our community. And the whole purpose of the Central Connection podcast is to have a deep conversation, to get to know you better, to get to know people in our community that are doing amazing things. And you are somebody who I am right at the top of the list. And, Woman of the Year, as honored by her magazine. And that's a huge honor. You're in your prime right now, and you're still moving up. So it's pretty exciting. And just, I see it in you. I see it in your eyes. I see it in your aura about you. And you're a fantastic light for our community. And that's why the whole purpose of this for me in starting a podcast, like who the hell am I to start a podcast? I don't know. It's just something I've wanted to do, but more or less to be able to share the bits and pieces that I see in Dubuque. And sometimes I get phantasmal about, the different things happening in our community. But I think to show people who are in other communities, this is an amazing place to be and to attract them to Dubuque, because in hearing your conversation with David and just learning more about you, you feel like Dubuque has really put its arms around you.
Yeah.
And you feel like this is home. And so getting to know you more, having this conversation helps us show other people how this community embraces people who have a mission and want to do great things. Right. So that's a big introduction, but I'm excited to be here with you. And I just want to, just hear from you. So how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good today.
Good.
Yeah, we have a little bit of unexpected snow, but that doesn't bother me. So.
Snow in March.
Yeah,
not a big deal.
good.
I texted you last night and said, hey, are you going to be able to make it? And you're like, I'm a Wisconsin girl. No snowstorm's going to stop me. So
That's true.
That's exciting. Real quick sponsor, The Spot Nutrition, Dubuque, Iowa, local, amazing place. If you're looking for, I stopped there today because I had a little bit of a cold going on or something, having kid germs in the household. I thought I was invincible, but I'm not. But I got their, I don't even know the name of it. It's like the Health Bomb tea. They've got nutritional teas, amazing people, Alex and Angela, fantastic local business in town. And I wanted to just give them a prop there, sponsoring today's episode. And I should have just had a Convivium sponsorship with some coffee with you, but we'll do that next time.
Next time. Spread the love.
So take us into who is Leslie. If I've never met you, it's interesting because we know each other, but I'm somebody who's never met you before. I'm sitting across the table. Where are you from? What's your story?
That's a great question and a big one. So I was born in Sauk City, Wisconsin. The area is called Sauk Prairie. It's a really tiny town. It's primarily a dairy farming town. At least when I was there, that was the main source of income or whatever.
Yeah.
And but like a lot of people say, my family wasn't from there. I wasn't like our family hadn't been there for generations and generations.
How long had your family been there?
They just moved there when my parents got married. So I have a kind of an interesting origin story. My dad is Palestinian.
Oh, wow.
And he moved to the States in 1962 to go to college. He got a scholarship to go to college, of all places, in La Crosse, Wisconsin. I don't know how that happened. I do know how that happened, but that's a different, longer story.
Okay.
Anyway, so he got a scholarship to go to La Crosse. My mom is from Green Bay, and she was also going to college at La Crosse. So my parents met in college and got married.
He came directly from...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, came over on a boat with $50 in his pocket and a suitcase.
This is wild.
For real.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, it's the the great American story, right?
Yeah.
Coming to the States with nothing and making a life. And that's what he did. So he met my mom, and She was from a working class family in Green Bay. My grandfather on that side was a drill press operator in a crane factory.
Did your father speak fluent English?
He spoke 4 languages.
No way.
Yeah, he had been most recently working at the French embassy in Haifa, Israel.
Okay.
And so his French was better than his English. During the time when he was working there, he met a man from the States, from the U.S. Navy, who had business to do. He had to come and do stuff at the French embassy. So he struck up a friendship with my dad, and they would practice English together. He did know English, but he didn't have a conversation partner.
Right.
This guy took a real liking to my dad and said, you really need to, you're smart, you need to go to college, you need to get out of here.
Yeah.
Here's a book of scholarships for you to look at, and maybe you can find a scholarship in the States. And that's what he did. So that's the story.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And back in those days, a book of scholarships was like your ticket. You know? The World Wide Web wasn't out there.
Right. I asked my dad. My dad is the oldest of 4 boys, which is a venerated position in a Arab family. The oldest son is sort of in charge.
What does that mean, venerated?
It's just an important position in the family.
Okay.
The oldest son is looked to make decisions for the family if the father dies or whatever. It's an important position in the family. So by him leaving, I always asked him, I'm like, you're leaving, you're leaving. Did your family fight you on that? And they said, no, in fact, the opposite. They encouraged me to leave. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for Arabs in Israel.
Yeah.
His professional choices would have been very limited. So they encouraged him to come to the States.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so he comes here, he meets your mom.
Yeah, meets my mom. They both graduated from my college. My dad had a degree in chemistry, my mom a degree in physical education. So they looked for jobs, and they both were searching for jobs that were close to each other throughout, wherever. So they both got jobs in and around the Sauk Prairie area.
They became dairy farmers?
They did not. Apparently they need teachers and chemists too.
Interesting, yeah.
So they, moved here. Their first apartment was this tiny little place, we used to drive by this is where we used to live and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So they moved in, I guess, they married in 67. So I think around 67 or late 67 or 1968, they moved. And then I was born in 1972.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm the oldest of 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
So that's the very early.
That's the
origin
early
story.
on. So you're the oldest of 2. You have a younger. What's the age difference between you?
4 years difference.
4 years. So
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And so then coming up in this small community.
Yeah, which
you know?
was great. It was really wonderful growing up in a small town. I really enjoy having that experience in my background. But we were always a little bit different, because my dad had an accent.
Yep.
We were from someplace else. We didn't do the normal family vacations. Like we didn't go to Disney World or whatever. You know what I mean? Like we would try to, as many times as and money allowed, go back to visit his family in Israel.
So you've been to Israel multiple times. Oh my
Yep.
gosh. I don't even know if I should go into that.
Yeah.
About what you're feeling right now.
Yeah,
with
it's
the state
crazy.
of the world.
It's crazy. Yeah. So yes, and I think given the times and the money available and the technology, my parents did a very good job of raising us to know who our family was on that side of the world. I have a relationship with all of my cousins. I know them. I've been there back many times as an adult. In fact, just last summer.
Yeah.
And so it's a remarkable feeling to have a feeling of home, many, many thousands of miles away from your home.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And so that's informed who you are today. 'Cause
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
getting from there, you went to University of
Madison.
Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Madison?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think to that, like I always, even though I was in a small town, like I always had a much broader view of the world. Like I knew there was more out there.
Yeah.
And that was always, I think that's a important part of my psyche, just to know that, there's this and I love this, but there's also a lot more out there to explore. So I went to college, which I went to college pretty close to home, but I always knew I wanted to go there.
Yeah.
And I went 4-year, at UW-Madison, and I got a joint degree in journalism and anthropology.
Wow.
Yep. So the journalism degree is where I, wanted to work. The anthropology degree was kind of a passion. I just really am interested in people and culture.
Yeah.
And so those two things I just melded them together. Okay, so I went to college and I graduated from college and then began looking for jobs. This was in 1994. So it was a bit of a recession, I think, at that time. So I had a little hard time finding a job, but I ended up finally being employed by well, it wasn't that small, by a trade publishing company in the Chicago suburbs. So that was called IHS Publishing. And I didn't know that I was going to like technical writing. I always knew I wanted to write, as I wanted to make my living with words, and so I always knew that. And we can get into that part too if you want to.
I also want you to dive into because you're an amazing singer, artist,
musician. We can do that too.
You're one of the most interesting people I know. So that's cool. When did that start, by the way? Did that start in college? Yeah.
Oh, I did not sing. This is a good lesson for everybody. I was always singing, like blah, blah around the house.
Yeah.
But I did not sing in public for the first time until I was 38 years old.
No way.
Never too late to start, people.
Oh my gosh. Well, as we're sitting here at Centrally Rooted, this is a place where you can come and get your
exactly.
pop you open as an artist. That's amazing. Okay, go back to what you're saying. So you're working at the publishing company.
Yeah. So I got the job there, and the magazine, it was a magazine, a trade publishing magazine, which I didn't even know that industry existed. It was a very specific technical magazine for a very specific industry.
Yeah.
So I worked on a magazine called Surface Mount Technology, which was a particular method of manufacturing printed circuit boards. So I helped edit and write incredibly technical information. The readers of that magazine were engineers. So I really learned so much about myself and, how to, I just really like technical writing. I don't know. I like diving into the science.
Did you know about circuit boards?
I didn't know about it at all.
How did you write about something you didn't know anything
about? They put me in a position where I was editing really white papers, technical white papers. So the job was to take this uber technical paper and make it readable, which that's the skill that I had. I have a liberal arts education and a journalism degree, and that's what we do is interpret, and synthesize and interpret information for people. So I figured it out. I asked a lot of questions. That we had an advisory board on the magazine, so I was able to, they were all industry experts, so I was able to foster relationships with them if I didn't understand something. And then I went to lots of conferences and things like that. So over time, I really learned.
So your brain was just expanding this entire time you're doing this.
Yep.
And you're young and you're ripe and you're ready to make some money and go to jobs. And
so it was really great.
Cool.
So I rose up through the ranks there to managing editor position, which is my sweet spot. So when you're a managing editor, you're not necessarily writing as much. You're making sure that magazine gets out on time, although I did also do writing. But my main purpose was to make sure that just to make sure it happened, to manage that process.
So, I remember so that's probably a new position for a woman to hold, correct?
No, definitely not. It wasn't that long ago.
When you were talking with David, I think you said something about you rose to a position that was...
That was a different publication.
Oh, so after this?
Yes. So then I was in that job for about 4 years. It was in the Chicago suburbs. I forced myself to live closer to the city so that I could learn how to drive in traffic.
Nice.
I mean, because the town I grew up in had one stoplight.
Yeah.
And then I went to college and I didn't have a car when I was in college. And I didn't need one.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, now I'm driving. I didn't want to be scared by traffic. And it was very scary to me. And so I put myself in a position where I had to learn how to drive in
Where did you
Chicago
live?
traffic.
What spot?
The job itself was in Libertyville, which is, just a suburb, but I lived in Evanston. So I wasn't in the city, but I was close. I still had to get on the freeway and get to work and, all
Evanston's beautiful too.
Yeah, it was a beautiful place to live.
Mm-hmm. That's cool.
So then after that, so I was there for 4 years and just decided I wanted to move back to Wisconsin. So I started just randomly sending resumes to publishing companies that were in and around the Madison area because that's where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So finally, I got a call from this company in Fort Atkinson called Cygnus Publishing. So they had me come in. They had a assistant editor position open, and they said, come in. So I had interviewed. And then one of the questions was, so this magazine was called Equipment Today. So it was all about construction equipment. So the readers of this magazine were contractors who purchased, maintained, and, had equipment of themselves. They were contractors, small and large.
Yeah.
So the purpose of the magazine was to write about the new excavator from Caterpillar and this, and talk about how you can maintain and buy new equipment. You know, what features to look for, that sort of thing.
Right.
So they asked me, are you going to be okay with this technical magazine? I'm like, did you look at my resume at all? I've been like really, really, this is so much less technical than what I had been doing. So during that time there, I really took a liking to the industry and the people in the construction publishing world. And so I was in that world for a really long time after that. So I had that position at that magazine for quite a while. I had a colleague on that magazine. His name was Steve, and he was from England, and he was like a rockabilly. I don't know how to say it other than that. Like, and this was prior to the time when people took their personal style less, I guess. Everybody was pretty vanilla. Steve was not at all. He had like Elvis hair, and like he always wore vintage suits to work. Nobody wore suits to work, but his were vintage suits. He had like tattoo sleeves. This was, again, before people had tattoo sleeves, and you know, they were all like really. And
you were immediately attracted to.
He was just cool. Yeah. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
like we liked each other a lot. We were very good work friends, and he taught me a lot. He knew a lot about the construction industry and how to write about it and how to approach it. So he really took me under his wing, and we had a great relationship, a great
Nice.
you know, work relationship. And then we kind of went our separate ways. He actually moved along and started a PR agency, an international PR agency, with another partner in England. So he was here in the States, and then he had this partner in England. And I continued to rise up the ranks through the publishing company. So I switched magazines from Equipment Today to another magazine called OEM Off Highway, where I was the main editor of that publication, the head editor. And then that magazine was written for engineers who designed and developed construction equipment. So I was really kind of melding these two experiences that I had, the construction equipment and the engineering and design side. And so that was a great experience for me. And then I was hired and promoted to be publisher of the magazine, which is kind of like the CEO of the magazine. So they oversee both the editorial side and the advertising side.
And that was a role you were breaking some barriers.
Correct. And not necessarily because I was a woman, but primarily because publishers typically come up through the sales side, through the advertising side, not through the editorial side. So that's only the second time that had happened in that company's history.
You're goal driven, so that felt pretty good.
Yeah, felt great. Yeah. So I was with that publication about 7 years, and then back to Steve. So my friend Steve had started this agency, and he became ill. So he had a brain tumor, and sadly fought that for a while, and then passed away. And then his business partner, Ben, came to me and said, you know, we need somebody to take over or would you be interested in working in the Milwaukee office, you know? And, you know, we'd offer you partnership stake and, you know, whole deal. So it was an incredibly lucrative and great career move for me. So I did that. I took over the American arm of this international PR agency.
Nice.
So this agency specialized in representing large multinationals who manufactured construction equipment. So the premise was we would have one central marketing agency for your European arm, for your Central American arm, for your American arm.
Yeah.
What we had seen as journalists on the other side of this equation were the marketing department of Caterpillar, I'm just using you as an example, was didn't know, the US didn't know what the Europe was doing, which didn't know what the Asia was doing, you know? And so having one central agency where all of that information was disseminated from was a real benefit, we thought. And so did the clients. So those were the folks that we represented. The main client that I worked with was Manitowoc Crane.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Mm-hmm,
I've worked on those cranes before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember years ago we were talking, I think we were up in Wisconsin, we were chatting, and you were like talking about how you would go to these, you know, you'd climb around in these big Caterpillars or these big bulldozers and talking to these big grunts, and then you're going from that to like managing, you know, papers, but also like working with these engineers, you know, like these people who the language difference and how you have to present to these folks is starkly different.
Yeah,
So,
it's different. And I
but
remember
that's,
one time when you helped us move that pizza oven, and I was
oh
like,
yeah, you knew
doing
your
all
signals. I'm like, what the hell? She knows how to signal. I'm like, I don't even have to tell her. She just knows how to throw the right signals to bring it up or down. So
yeah,
that's hard for people to understand crane signals. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that this tells me more a lot about like how you're so fluid. And I think that's important to have people in a community that are capable of, I guess I just have to think about like a chameleon, like you can change your color to match the surface you're working with. And
yeah. I think how I would say that is
yeah,
I seek to understand,
yeah,
and not necessarily people's words, but also their words, but also who they are and what their intentions are.
yep,
Because I think sometimes that's really important is to try and, people might have a hard time communicating, but what are they really trying to do here?
yeah,
And so
yeah.
I really try to look at that. That's,
So we got to jump into where, like, how did you get to Convivium? Like,
yeah,
give us
right.
I don't mean to
No,
gloss
no,
over, so don't miss anything.
no, no,
But
no,
how
I
did you
won't.
get from
Yep.
all of this, and where did you land in Dubuque, and where did
Yeah,
that
so
story go?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I was with the PR agency also for 7 years, I think somewhere in that neighborhood, and we got to the point where there was another business partner involved, and like we were really disagreeing on a lot of stuff. And I saw the writing on the wall. It was a minority partner. It wasn't going well. So
Hmm.
I said, you know what, guys, I'm gonna bow out. So they bought me out of my shares. And it was around that time that I had met Mike Munch, my partner.
Love Mike. Yeah.
Yep. And so he and I were talking during that time, and we really thought, well, we want to do something big, like in the world for the world, not because we're gonna make money, or not because, I mean, it'd be good to make money, but like not because of
But you were
that.
both already making money. Like I
Right,
remember, I
exactly.
remember when I first met Mike. It was on a dirt airstrip, and he flew in an airplane
Yeah.
and nearly ran me over. I was driving a skid loader across the guy's place, putting some.
At
It was
Wayne's.
Wayne Briggs' place,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
he happened to have a kiln, and we were kilning some old reclaimed two
Oh
by
gosh,
fours
yeah.
for Bob Johnson down at
Yeah.
that restoration warehouse,
Hmm.
and wild times. But yeah, I met Mike. I was like, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
He's flying in a plane and a little Piper or whatever, and he like lands on an airstrip. Like this guy's awesome. I want to
Yeah.
know him.
Yeah. So we got together, and kind of the trajectory, or I don't want to say purpose of the relationship because that's not right, but the thing we wanted to accomplish as a couple
Yeah,
was to bring something into the world that would help change the world in a way.
that's
And
big.
yeah.
And
So
not to go, what age were you both at this time
I
in
was
your life?
39, he was 49.
Okay. So, oh wow, Mike's older than I thought. I thought,
He's 60 something now.
wow.
60,
Okay.
62.
He seems he's a young spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so that's the time when you're starting to think about legacy and things
Exactly.
like that. Yeah.
Exactly. And me too, really. I don't have children, and and so what am I going to leave in the world? That was a really
Yeah.
important question for me. Not that, anyway, that was a question for me. And so we started really talking about it a lot, and we started with the question of legacy, like what do we want our legacy to be? And then we started with, okay, a great way to create legacy is to solve a problem.
Yep.
So what problem do we want to solve? And we, after lots of talking about it, we arrived at the problem of disconnection, which is funny because that's the
It's
name of this podcast.
Central connection.
Yes.
When I heard
Yes.
you and David talking about that, I was like, this is so perfect.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is great.
So the problem of disconnection,
Yeah.
because we both feel that the root of most problems in society is disconnection,
Yeah.
is lack of understanding, a lack of empathy and being able to see others' perspectives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a pretty big problem to solve. But
It is.
but we thought, well, what's something that can create connection at a lot of different levels? So, a connection where we can connect individually, a connection where we can connect to our larger community, and a connection where we can connect to our larger environment, the environment.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us just don't understand our individual impact on the world, on the environment. So what's something that can create a connection thread through all of those concentric circles of connection? And we thought, well, food, right? Because food, we all have to eat, but
Yeah.
food nourishes us way beyond our our bodies,
Yeah.
because we can create a connection over a table, have a discussion. We can help our community with food for those who don't have food.
Yeah.
We can show people how to grow food, which in turn helps improve our environment. So all of that, all of those things can be accomplished through food.
And even by showing people how to grow food, it disconnects them from uh, this imaginary or this dependence, on I hate to use like Frito Lay or like the
Sure.
we're driven so much into this monoculture of food.
That's right.
That's really it's disease. It's really I hate to say it, but like the stuff that is out there,
It's
it's
calorie rich and nutrient poor.
flavor rich, and
Mm-hmm.
nutrient poor. Yeah. And I struggle with that when I'm not feeling well, when I'm not feeling my best. And I've just gone through this recently when like, I don't know what it was, a shift happened. It happens to all of us at different times. Some people talk about it. Some people keep it to themselves. I'm pretty vocal, but I find that when that happens, I turn to like, numbing myself with either food or whatever. And I find a way to numb out. And like, usually it's with junk food.
Yeah, and don't be too hard on yourself, Kyle. That's millions of dollars and hundreds of people in labs somewhere developing just the right exact little piece of food for you to crave that way.
Exactly.
So, don't. There was a quote. I'm see if I can get this right. It was a Washington Post columnist, and she said something like, "Okay, it's you. You are you, and." The food industry is Serena Williams, and so you're up against her in a tennis match. All right,
Right.
So you're gonna lose.
You're gonna
right?
lose, yeah.
You're gonna lose.
Hopefully you're gonna
It's
learn something.
It's stacked against you.
Yeah.
Meaning you have to make conscious choices to change how you eat and how you approach food, because it is all around us to stop at McDonald's and eat off from the gas station
Yep.
and, down a bag of chips when we feel bad and all of that. Which isn't to say that those things are like categorically wrong. Of course you can eat chips.
Yeah.
You just can't eat them all the time.
Well, it's
you know?
interesting. Like one of the examples. So I'm thankful that I'm surrounded by places that I can go grab, good food. And I have to admittedly say this. Like I love Convivium. I love where you guys are at, but it's somehow off my beaten path.
It is, yeah.
It's unfortunate that you're not on this like thoroughfare.
Right.
It'd be great if the H&W building was on Central, so we could close Central and push everybody past you on Jackson Street. You know.
Yeah.
But it's because that's been hurting, the business of
Yeah.
just not having the pass through.
That's right. Yeah.
So like Ryan, for instance, at Devour, like he
Yeah.
makes quality food, man. He goes and buys good stuff, and I'll often slide in there and eat, because we have all this bartering going on between us, and he's always like sliding me a great little meal, a
Yeah.
burrito, this and that.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah, he's
fantastic
great. Yeah.
chef, and so it's like having opportunities to eat places like that and just eat quality food versus junk. And my wife's very conscious about eating good. But another thing that brings me to like what's happening at Convivium, I think Callie went to this yesterday or 2 days ago. You had like a garden planning event.
That's right. Our lunch and learn. Yep.
Lunch and learn.
Yep.
I think Callie went to that maybe.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. On Wednesday.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we have a garden, and like I grew up with a garden. I grew up in a small town. The garden was a big deal. I had to go mow grass and spread the grass clippings around to keep weeds down. But like I was excited because I planted the cucumbers that I was able to harvest with my mom, and then we learned how to pickle these pickles. And I was like, it was a really cool thing to
Big
learn.
deal. Yeah.
I didn't carry that forward because of the way my life trajectory went. Like college was just like, oh yeah, you go to Walmart and you grab like all these packaged things, you just ship them in your closet and you eat out of that for a while, or ramen noodles were a thing. Like,
Yeah.
we lived in a very fast paced world with.
I mean, food wasn't the priority in college.
It
right?
wasn't.
So
Yeah.
me neither. I mean, I like that in college too.
Yeah. What you and Mike have started with, which is these dilapidated greenhouses that were falling apart and pouring tons of money.
Yeah.
That it just pouring your savings
Yeah.
into creating this thing that it's fun to look at and be like, oh yeah, they just did that, it must be nice, it's like, no, I've walked into your office in years past here when you could just see it on your face. I mean, your dark circles under your eyes.
Yeah,
You're
I
just
mean,
like
it's not easy.
trying to balance all this stuff, and whether it's grants or whether it's payroll or somebody, whatever it is, like running a business is not easy.
It's not easy. There's so much minutia. There's just
Yeah.
so much minutia. And then the cook doesn't show up. And then we found a bag with somebody's meth needles in the back and everyone's freaking out about that. I mean, there's just like every day there's something like that.
Yep.
So you better know why you're there.
Yep.
You better have a very strong purpose for being there because it's pretty easy to just give up when all of that stuff is happening.
And you went into a neighborhood that I got to be honest, like it's so weird because you guys you weren't exactly from Dubuque, so you didn't
No.
have these preconceived notions. I grew up here from grade 8th grade on, and there was this notion of like, I wouldn't call it the flats, but the north side of the flats, or like the downtown.
It's the wrong side of the tracks, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like the wrong side of the
Yeah.
tracks. And it's like, no way. Like I grew up in Lansing, Iowa, and like the north end reminds me of that.
It's it
It's
was
like this
important.
beautiful-
So again, if we had looked at a spreadsheet and all of the things about location, and
Yeah.
doing all the things you're supposed to do when starting a business, this makes absolutely
Zero
no
cents
sense.
on paper.
0 cents on paper.
Yeah.
But we knew that. We knew we were speculating, and we also knew that in order for a neighborhood to improve, someone's got to take a first step.
Yep.
You just have to do it. And so we did, and we had the resources to be able to do that, and we did. It was a huge risk, and it still is every day. It's not like it's super stable. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
But that's that. Knowing, that deep knowing that you're doing the right thing.
Well, expanding from like, I'm kind of talk in circles. I don't have a really clean path
Yeah.
here, but I think that's okay. Like putting gardens, like using existing assets, like these grass lawns that were haphazardly mowed sometimes, and these chain link fences. Like, talk me through how embracing the neighbors and neighborhood as you were farming a community.
Yeah,
You became
that's
a
exactly
farmstead,
right.
and then you said, okay, well then you guys have an acreage here that's under it's run fallow.
Yeah,
And
essentially. That's
how do
exactly
how do we
right.
put flower beds in here and put AJ and the team on
Yep.
expanding? Like you guys have a little, like you've created a culture of agriculture in the North End.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's unusual. It's amazing.
It's unusual.
But it's a model I think that could be
It could be
like,
totally duplicated.
franchised.
Yes,
duplicated.
and when I calm down and have not all of this stuff happening, and we have people in place to manage the day-to-day
Yeah.
at Convivium, that's what I would like to do,
Yeah.
is spread that word. I mean, it doesn't have to look exactly like Convivium, but there's ways to duplicate this in communities throughout the country. So the gardens. So we, my approach to almost everything, and I think you heard me say this at the Woman of the Year speech, is if plan A doesn't work, you have the entire rest of the alphabet.
I love that. Yeah.
And you do, and just keep going. And that applies to almost everything. But again, you have to know why you're there. The why has to be very clear.
It speaks to resilience.
That's the
Like
trick.
you're one of the most resilient
Yeah.
people I know, and there's that word carries so much weight with me because you have to be resilient in this world.
You do, and it's not always easy.
No.
So we had the problem of, okay, well, we have these giant greenhouses on this footprint. We have very limited space on our actual footprint. We had to put in a parking lot, which was going to be where we were growing everything, but because of zoning and whatnot, we needed to put in a parking lot.
Yeah.
So our back lot needed to be for that, so we couldn't grow there. So we just thought, well, we need to grow, but let's look around us. Like maybe there's some other things that we can do. So there was this hair salon, still is, on the corner of 28th and Jackson.
Okay.
Leslie's Hair Emporium, also another Leslie.
Oh,
So
nice.
That's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Yep. So it's in an old house, and there's a backyard with it. So we thought, well, it's a hair salon. They're not using their backyard as a backyard, for a family or
Yeah.
whatever. So we thought, well, let's just ask. So we literally just knocked on the door and said, what would you think about if your crazy neighbors put a garden in your backyard? This was before Convivium itself was open. We were still under construction. So, we talked, and obviously they knew stuff was happening over there. And they said, great, go ahead. So we did with volunteer labor. The boards that we used for the raised beds were donated from Ted Stackis, who,
Nice. Okay.
yeah. And the soil that we used was donated from the Trappist monks out there, and it was all volunteer labor. So we put in a whole bunch of little raised beds in that backyard, and we started growing there. And it looked great. AJ is our farm manager.
Yep.
In fact, this weekend is his 10-year anniversary with us.
I was gonna say he's been there for
A lot
the get-go.
from the beginning. Again, before we were like officially open.
Yeah.
And so AJ is very particular, and he's very fastidious about how the gardens look, which is great. One of the kind of criticisms of community gardens is that they can look a little ratty. You
Yep.
know, like people have a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning of the season, then it wanes throughout the year.
We get busy.
Yeah, I mean, and who likes to weed anyway?
Right.
So we made sure that they were very, very aesthetically pleasing. And from that, what happened is the neighbor next door said, hey, can you do that in my yard? And
Yeah.
then that neighbor said, can you do that in my yard? And now we have about 4 or 5 auxiliary gardens and 13,000 square feet of growing space that's all been donated.
That's
Yeah,
so
it's
cool.
incredible. We produce between 4,000 and 5,000 pounds of produce each year.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And all out of the North End area there.
Yeah. I mean,
amazing.
within just very short walking distance of Convivium.
And then the connection, just to stay tight on this, is like you've built this. Well, I'll go into this. One of it dovetails into the fact that like this winter you had a rough winter. Things were getting tight, and all of a sudden your boiler goes out or one of your heating systems goes
we have
out.
the geothermal.
And you made a from the heart post. Just
Yeah.
said, "Geez, guys, we're getting hit here, and you know if anyone has any suggestions or if they could support us a little bit here and help us out, we had this boiler go down. We got to make this work."
Yeah, and my intention through that post
Yeah.
was to just pick up our restaurant business, because the idea of Convivium is that our kind of restaurant and rental of the space for events helps support all of the rest of the work that we do in the community.
Yeah.
And what had been happening is our business had been slowing. It's just a normal slowdown in the winter.
Yep.
But plus the traffic issue that you talked about with the H&W building,
Yeah.
it's just, at least, I mean, who knows the ups and downs of restaurants, but that's what we could point to.
Yep.
And so we had been slowing considerably. And I'm like, well, I mean, this is going to cost $5,000 or $6,000 to fix this boiler, and we just don't have it.
Right,
you
we're
know?
hitting a space that's not even full at capacity right now.
Yeah, and and
It's getting close to holidays. People are off going shopping and going everywhere else and not there. Yeah.
and so I just had this flash of feeling like I'm just going to ask for help.
Yep. Which is really, I have to say, is really hard
It's really
for someone
hard.
like yourself, myself as
Very
well.
hard,
'Cause
very
we're
hard.
independent. We're going to do it ourselves. And
Yeah.
like asking for help shows weakness. And like, I know we're
Yeah.
built the same in that regard. And it's a really challenging thing
It was
to
a
do.
very humbling thing to do.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, I'm just going to ask. Like, we've helped a lot of people. Not that it's a tit for tat, but our presence in the community has always been one about hospitality and generosity.
You guys have given.
Yeah.
The casserole program during
Yeah.
COVID, and just, I mean, people go, the giving that you do is far beyond just what you give to others, but I think it's actually by giving an opportunity for people who crave the desire, their desires to give. Like there's something about being of service. You've created a place, because
Yeah.
even having volunteers is one of the hardest things ever, because you're like, I'll just do it myself, because like I don't want to explain this or create an assembly line. But you've created a space where people can come and assemble things, and then like they're being of service, which fills their cup.
Yep.
And then they're filling other people's cup or fridge or et cetera. And so like by providing that has been
opportunity.
huge, and has connected you to so many people. Feel a connection.
Yeah.
So this thing goes out, this post goes
Yeah.
out.
So this post goes out. It was like 3:00 on a Friday or 10:00 on a Friday morning or something like that. Because I'm like, okay, if we can just like get our restaurant business back to normal levels over the weekend, I'll be happy. We'll be okay.
Yep.
It went crazy. It was shared like I don't know how many
Hundreds
times.
of
I mean,
times.
more than hundreds. It was I think like 1,800 times.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, "We gotta help Convivium! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!" And I'm like, "Oh no!" And I mean, oh no, good in a good way.
But also like,
But I'm
yeah.
calling the cooks and I'm calling the service. I'm like, we're gonna be busy
We're gonna
tomorrow.
be
You know,
swamped.
it's gonna be crazy.
all hands on deck.
And yeah,
Oops.
And yeah,
It's like
I
when
know.
they do
And
that.
I know, like, ooh, maybe I should have checked. Nah, oh, that's okay. Just,
Yeah.
let's go
Like the
with
John Taffer does, like
Yeah.
they kill the restaurant by putting everyone in line outside. Like there's nothing worse than when like you just get hit in any restaurant. If you
Yeah,
get
when
hit
you're
with that
slammed.
rush, it's tough on everybody.
Yeah.
So you just blew it
So,
out.
yeah. But
But gift
long
cards and all
story
kinds,
short,
yeah.
right? The gift cards. I mean, I laid out in the post. If
Here are
you
the things
can't,
you could do to help us.
yes, here are the things. One of those things is sharing this post. If you
Mhm.
can't afford or you don't have the resources or whatever, I'm not.
Yeah.
Maybe you just share this. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
A lot of people did that. And then gift cards. Anyway, long story short, in 3 days we raised $30,000.
Nuts.
I mean, I was in tears.
Yeah.
Like I knew that we were important to people and I
Yeah.
knew that we helped people, but to get that much
Love.
validation
Yeah.
and exactly, love back from people so swiftly and so warmly.
I'm gonna make you cry
It's
now.
still-
I know.
It was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
But it speaks to you, to Mike, and what you've started, and also to your entire team.
Yeah.
Everybody that's involved with Convivium is just the solid, core, amazing people.
Yeah.
And that's the energy of connection that, like, I think that vibe that you guys are creating in their community, hearing that about the post, like it's seen, it's heard, but it's felt.
Yeah.
And that's something we want to continue to do in other places.
Right.
It's that environment. The North End is so amazing. Like
It's
even what Ted and
beautiful.
Darla have done with like the North End, like
Right.
they fixed up this building and they created a safe and fun space for live music and
Yeah, it's a
for
great little bar.
a
Yep.
little neighborhood hangout and then Chris, I can't say enough about Copper
Yep.
Kettle. It's like I love what he's done there, and he has such a tight run ship, and
Yep.
it's amazing. And so those are two places I can think of. You can name more. Even what you have with the City Girl Farming Place
Yes.
on Central. You guys have purchased multiple buildings,
Mhm.
renovated them, and turned them into community spaces.
Yeah.
And that's a community kitchen, right?
Yes. Yep.
What's that called exactly?
Convivium Central Kitchen. So
Convivium
it's on
Central Kitchen.
Central
Yeah.
Avenue, and it's this idea of a central kitchen that people can share. So it's a rentable kitchen
Got
for
it.
small food producers who need to have a code kitchen to work in.
Yep. And is that working at capacity?
It is not working at capacity. We can take many more clients. We've
Okay.
actually, there was a little bit of bumps in the road with the refrigeration and all of that. We're now in a place where everything's very stabilized, and we feel confident to be able to offer this at a larger level. So
Well, that goes into I'm getting prompted here from David on dreams. So like,
yeah.
what are your like if you can no barriers? Like, what's your dream for the continuation of Convivium and this legacy you're building?
Yeah, that's a good question. My dream is that it reaches a point where it's self-sustaining and can live on beyond me. And then beyond that is to help others throughout the world or the US see that they can do these kinds of things in their community in a way that works for them. And through this kind of franchising idea that we had mentioned earlier.
But the whole point of this conversation being a public, we're recording ourselves
Yeah.
and we're doing this is like, goes back what we spoke about earlier. Like we're so much bigger through this internet and the shareability of
Yep.
these conversations. The intention is to attract and connect with a listener who's maybe in, from Portland to Maine, who knows, like, wherever you're at and you're like, saying, maybe I'm not getting what I want out of my community, but I've heard this amazing space, these great people, and this incredible community of Dubuque. We live in this, and it's not too far because you grew up in the Driftless region.
Yeah.
And as did I, and like this, we're still in the Driftless in Dubuque with these bluffs and like this. Talk about getting a hug from your environment, like mine's a Spain. You walk anywhere around,
It feels like that.
It's
Yeah.
so cool. Yeah. So like, if you wanted to come and relocate to a very affordable and attainable place, this is it.
I agree.
And-
I couldn't
and-
agree more.
And it's the people we have in our community are fantastic, but there are more people who can bring a wider and more broadened horizon to this community and see it differently than those that live in it.
Let me share a story with you.
Yes.
So one of the things that we do at Convivium is we are an excursion stop for the riverboat cruises that come through.
Smart.
Yeah. So last summer we did 35 tours of people that were on the cruise boats.
Wow.
It was a lot.
Who leads those?
What?
Who leads those?
Me.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
AJ and I, we tag team it. If it's
All right.
during the week, he does it. If it's on the weekend, it's me. So it was about half and half. So it was the very last tour of the year. And there was a couple, and they come to Convivium and we walk around and we look at the gardens and talk about the mission and, all of that. It's the normal tour that we do. So come and take a tour.
Yeah.
And we were ending the tour and there was this couple, and the woman's like, I'm buying a house in Dubuque.
Nice.
She's from California. I'm going to buy a house in Dubuque. And I'm like, okay. And then the husband's like, you don't know my wife. She's going to buy a house in Dubuque. And I'm still like, okay, great. Good for you.
Can we grow a garden in your backyard?
Yeah, exactly. I want you to buy a house in Dubuque. That's great. She felt so drawn to what we were doing, the feeling of the city, the warmth here. There's a feeling here. And I don't know how to decide. I don't know how to say it other than that. Anyway, a couple of months later, she had taken my business card. A couple of months later, I get a text from her. Hey, I'm in town. I'm looking at houses.
No way.
She bought a house. She bought a house in Dubuque. Yeah. And she said, now I'm looking at this one or this one. What can you tell me about these areas or whatever? So I gave her my thoughts.
Yep.
And I believe ended up buying a house on Jackson. So it's pretty cool. At the point I was talking to her, she was under contract, so who knows what actually happened.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I haven't heard from her since. Back a little bit.
Yeah,
so we were kind of talking about like how I got here, and so I moved here in 2012.
Yep.
To be with Mike. We bought the property at Convivium in 2013. We began planning and construction. Construction started in 2015. We opened in 2017, and that's when things really launched. And life happens, and we've been steadily marching along. And
7 years, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, 7 years this month actually. Yeah. And through that process, Mike and I actually realized that we weren't really suited to be life partners, and so we've split up.
Yeah.
And he had remained in the business for a couple of years after that. But as of Jan 1 of this year, I've bought the entire business from Mike.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah, so it's me now.
That's wild. That's awesome.
Yep. So I own the building, the business, the nonprofit's not owned by anybody, as you know. But so it's all been me.
That's
so
awesome.
I really, without his spirit and just without his spirit, this never would have happened. And frankly, without his money, this never would have happened either. Without both of our contributions. So I just want to publicly acknowledge that he's been a great force as well. But he's officially retired from Convivium as of January 1st.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
And so we were kind of starting on your dreams for this. So to carry this forward, where does it go from here?
I think more of the same. I mean, a lot of people ask that. You keep growing. And I think I've reached a limit now. I want more of the same. I think we have created a structure in which we are not. So our mission, our official mission at Convivium is to improve life through food. Yeah. So there's so many directions and things that could take. And so I think we have a very good mission statement that allows some room for growth and interpretation with whoever comes into our sphere. Yeah. And so I have always approached this like, if you have an idea, let's try it. We had one of our employees in the kitchen. He has a PhD in American Studies. Oh, wow. And he wanted to do a college level course or class at Convivium on talking about food and culture and food and history and food and, at a very high level. Yeah. And so we launched that program in February, and it went, I'm like, okay, I didn't know if people were going to be interested in reading academic articles about food and then coming together to talk about it. I had no idea whether or not that was going to be something that had legs in our community. Right. And it did. We had a group of about 15 people who joined and came, read the 3 articles ahead of time and came and had, high level discussions
Yeah.
about that. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, I think.
It's
And
fantastic.
I never would have thought of that. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm way more practical. So, I'm going to show you how to cook a quiche and,
Yeah.
things like that. My approach and my sort of interest level is more at that level. But he wanted to try that. It was based on a similar program in Brooklyn, which was there's no real place to learn as an adult at a high level outside of the university environment, outside of a degree-driven path.
Yeah.
There's not just learning for learning's sake at a high level. And there's, I think, a place for it. I think there's many people who are interested in doing
Is that continuing?
We did the first program and we've finished it, and now we're evaluating whether or not to move on.
Was it documented?
You mean like
Audio,
no,
video?
No, it was not.
Interesting.
It very well could be. But from that, and now without committing to anything,
Yeah.
one of our board members is a food science professor at Clark. He participated. He was one of the things there.
Who is that?
Sunil Malapati.
Okay.
So he saw through this. He was also questioning whether or not this level of discussion would be sustainable or something that community members would want to participate in.
Well, locally. Yeah. Can
Yeah.
you say community? Because it has to be sustainable locally.
Yeah.
They have to show up.
And if people wanted to do, if there was even any sort of interest.
Yeah.
And he was similarly pleasantly surprised in the way that I was at folks showing up for that and really engaging in that conversation at a deep level. And so for him, it sparked the idea of perhaps there's a real way that Clark and Convivium can work together to do this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Without committing to anything. This is just ideas. So just
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
clear about that. But I mean, I never would have done that. I never personally would have done that. And because I allowed the space for that to happen, I allowed one of the people that works with us to follow a passion that they
Yes.
had. We've now opened the door for perhaps a much larger connection. And that's kind of my approach to
Yep.
management.
Yep.
You have to allow
Let
people
things
that.
live.
You have to allow that organic growth. Now, that's not saying that we don't also have to mop the floors and do all of that stuff. But when you have somebody in your sphere who's engaged at that level, it's a real gift. And why wouldn't you allow that space to happen? Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And in that way, Convivium will continue to grow if we imbue the culture with that sort of freedom.
Yep. Creative opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that just sparks, because I'm an idea. I know that about myself, and it's a blessing and a curse because I can have these. I remember Mike Van Milligan calling me out on like a call. We were like trying to save a building in downtown, and he's like, Kyle, this can't be another one of your fanciful ideas. Like, he used that term now. Like,
Okay.
it lives in my head to
Yeah.
this day, and I've reminded him of that once. But he's so right. Like, because I'm a creative, and I get excited about following the path of the ideas. But when you get into the weeds and you have to follow through with some of that stuff, I'm like, oh man, this is a lot of freaking work.
Yeah.
That's just part of it.
It is. And I think that's a really important part to acknowledge.
Yeah, you can't just live in the ether. You have to get granular.
And that's
get
where
to work.
Mike and our partnership really worked. Not that I don't have ideas. I have lots of ideas. But he's really he's going to push the envelope on ideas. And I'm very good at execution.
Yeah.
And so that worked. I always said he was the dreamer and I was the doer.
You need that
And
combination.
you really do need to have that.
And I'm a combination of both at times, but sometimes
we all
my
are.
dreams get too big and then I have to go and do them. I'm like, oh,
What was I thinking?
yeah. But what I just had to thought of, because a family member of mine in Chicago is like the 5th generation iron worker. They have this forge, and Paul's an amazing metal worker, but more of an artist. And his dad's run this forge for years. But like this combination of how the universities want to connect with these more granular things, like not great, but these, like they wanted to connect with like a little offshoot. So seeing what's happened there with the university and like that's where things are going in higher education. Jeffrey Bullock and I sit down and talk often, and I think that like having it all contained on campus becomes a little bit isolating. But when you can show that maybe they have a food science degree or something that's outside of So then either UD or Clark or even Loris like could have and host pieces of their programming at an offshoot like that. It develops a new opportunity for them.
Yeah.
But it's thinking outside the box.
Yeah,
And when you're
and-
in that,
And so, we had a board meeting last night. Sunil was there. We always have a meal with our board meeting.
Nice.
And so we go through all the all the stuff we have to do in the board meeting.
Yeah.
And then we have the meal, and that's where the ideas really happen. And
Yep.
it happens every single time. And it's like, it's so great to have that meal because that's when we really start talking, And so another member of our board is Kathy Hutton. She runs the food bank here in town,
Yeah.
the St. Stephen's Riverbend Food Bank in town. And Convivium.
is that right here on White Street? The
No,
food
no,
pantry?
here's how, I didn't know this either until I started getting into this world. There's food pantries.
Yep.
They're the people that interact directly with the user, the patron.
Yep.
Food banks feed the food pantry.
Oh, okay.
So food comes to the food bank, and then the pantry can purchase or get food from the food bank, and it's delivered there.
Interesting.
Those are called agency partners.
Yep.
So Convivium is also an agency partner with the food bank. So we purchase a lot of our food for casseroles from the food bank for pennies on the dollar.
Got it.
So anyway, another thing that we do at the food bank are these boxes. We do these food box distributions twice a month.
Yep.
It's a cardboard box full of produce, dairy, meat. The boxes come, and there's all this stuff in it, like a parsnip and beets and these giant sweet potatoes and a bag of lentils and, delicious, good food. But
Yeah.
many people don't know what to do with a parsnip.
That's like me with the CSA.
Yeah.
I get this box of all this great stuff. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do.
So my idea about this is I was talking to Kathy last night. I'm like, because we don't know, it's like we don't know what we're getting in the box. It just shows up.
Yeah.
And I asked her, well, how far ahead do you know what's in the box? Because I don't know how your process works.
Yeah.
She's like, we assemble them the day before. And I said, here's my idea. If we could even get that box the day before, get it and video us taking the box apart.
What do we do with it? Yep.
And then come up with some ideas about, okay, you can do these things with this
Like
parsnip.
video that and then share
have-
that. Like
exactly.
The QR code.
Correct.
David knows all about this. Like the QR code gets like stuck on.
Yeah.
The sticker goes on the box. The person, at least on their phone, can like, oh, okay, this is how I peel the potatoes. I steam this. I boil that.
That's right.
Now I have an amazing.
And here's some ideas. So I presented this during our meal time.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and then
Necessary too.
Sunil goes, well, that's an opportunity to work with nutrition students in terms of internships.
Yeah.
Nutrition students, potentially social work students,
Yeah.
with the video and marketing, video production
Yep.
students.
Yep.
All of these different potential partnerships through this vehicle of helping people learn how to prepare healthy food for themselves. I'm so excited.
And not
about
only
this.
the people in need of that, like I need that.
We
Like,
all
I'm
need
an
it.
adult
It's
that
not-
has means, and I have no clue what to do with half of the
Yeah.
food that comes down.
Yeah, this isn't about, just for a certain segment of the population. This is for people who want to eat healthy. And we're
Yes.
just using this as the catalyst of, it's kind of like what's that one food show where you have to go pick the things out of the pantry and chop, I don't know, whatever, one of those
Yeah.
chopped or whatever,
Yeah.
where you have a set of weird ingredients and then you
Yep.
got to do something with it. It's like, it'll be like that.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah. And so that's what we want to try to do with that. So we'll see.
Any way we can support that, let us know.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah.
Is that
Well, I
weird?
wanted to hear, we don't have to stop at any
Yeah.
given point. So I wanted to hear more about your parents and how their journey got to, if you're okay with talking about that,
course.
because they
Yeah.
came to Dubuque as well.
They did. So yeah, and in terms of resilience, the last few years have been a little bit of it's been hard. I've had a few difficult last years.
Yeah.
So my parents, they were in Sauk City their entire lives, and also they were getting older, obviously, and so we encouraged them over a long period of time to move to Dubuque. My sister is a world traveler. She's all around the world, and it wasn't really
What does she do?
she's a jewelry designer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she works with traditional artisans throughout the world to create her designs.
Cool.
So it's a very interesting line of work that she does.
Yeah.
But she's traveling a lot. She's not in one spot. I'm in one spot. It's kind of, I was going to be the one to take care of my parents,
Yep.
as they age. So we encouraged them to move. We got what they did. They bought a house, just a couple houses down from Convivium.
Yep.
We remodeled it, got it ready for them to age in it, making sure it was all appropriate for mobility and all of that kind of stuff. They moved here in September of 2019, and my dad kind of unexpectedly passed away in January of 2020, so just a few months after arriving here. Yeah. And then, they'd been together for 50 plus years, and my mom, she couldn't do it. She died 6 months later. So they were here less than a year, and it's such a sadness. Like there was so
they wanted
much
to be together.
Yeah.
Their souls had to leave together.
It was so, and then Mike and I got divorced shortly
Crushing
after that. So it's been, in the span of 3 years, I've kind of lost my mooring, like my thick mooring lines to these kind of touch points in my life. So the last few years have been, this is how I kind of think about this. Like I had these very strong and thick connections with, these areas of my husband and my parents and, all of that. And those are gone. They're cast off, they're cast off the whatever. And now it's been a process of me, instead of these thick mooring lines, it's instead been threads that are connecting threads that are weaving together to also create a connection to community. Yeah. And so that's how I'm kind of thinking about my life now. I'm probably not going to have these same level of connections in my life. Instead, I have a million small ones that are woven together to create that same strength. And that's how I'm trying to approach things right now.
You've got my mind going in a woohoo area, but like thinking about the soul, like the untethered soul.
Yeah.
And when you're tethered, and your parents, a lot of times for people, parental or family relationships and connections really are that mooring line. But for people like ourselves, we love people, we love connection, conversation. I think, without that, in isolation, it becomes very hard for me. Like I've gone to silent retreats that have only lasted a day for a 3 to 5 day event,
Really? That's a real shocker, Kyle.
Is it?
Yeah.
I'm still due to go book another one of those, but I was at the monastery once, and I was there for I didn't even last the whole night. I think I was going to a 3-day silent retreat at the monastery and trying to get some things worked out. I think it lasted 10 hours. But I think that because I have these, you could call them strands, If I was up to my wife, she'd just be like, oh, just me and you and Ruby, and our family, that's it tight all the time. I'm like, I need more, But I think it's because I like to weave both in and out of that, and I'm triggered by the excitement of what people are doing and what they're interested in and what they're up to and where can I contribute in the smallest way, or how can I add a little spice to your idea and then flutter on, And
I think I'm like that too. But for me, it's delving into different worlds. Like I have a very varied background. And even my current interests are beyond Convivium, right? I mean, these are some of the things that you were kind of alluding to earlier. So obviously, food. A long time ago, I found myself saying yes to all these things and then resenting it.
Yep.
I know, and that's the terrible feeling. So I still sometimes do that, but I'm much, much better than I did. So how I got myself out of that was I thought to myself, I'm going to set for my own self some core values in which things I say yes to, or it's an easy yes. So they were food, family, friends, movement, and music. Those were it for me.
And I forgot to even mention, so out of those, you're a freaking bodybuilder. You're badass.
That's not a surprise. I mean,
it's movement.
That was one of my own personal core values.
Yeah.
And so is music. So when you see me doing all of these seemingly out of left field things, not really. This is who I am.
Yes.
So food's covered. We got the Convivium thing. Yep. Family and friends, of course. that's a important part of my life.
Yeah.
Movement. I can't remember all the ones I just said, but
movement.
Movement, music. So movement. I am not my best self unless I'm physically active in some way.
I think that goes for everybody.
Yeah, and I think I'm just not. It's really important for me to move my body.
Yeah.
It gets me out of my head. It releases tension, depression, all of that stuff. So I'm always physically active, but I'm also really goal oriented. So I can't just keep doing the same stuff at the gym. Like I have to have some reason I'm there.
Yeah.
So, and I always said also that the year I turned 50, I wanted to do some crazy physical challenge. I didn't know what that was going to be. It was going to climb a mountain or run a marathon or whatever. But the place where I'm at in my life, I had been doing a lot of weight training, and there were these other women at the gym who were doing these competitions. And I'm
Yeah.
like, well, maybe this is the thing for me. And boy, this is a big stretch for me. This isn't really who I am at all, but that's what I wanted to
I
do,
remember
right?
seeing the photos of you and I was like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
Yeah, so I worked very hard. It's
Yeah.
probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But yeah, I did a bikini bodybuilding
It was
competition.
wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I won my age group.
You
so-
killed it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but
But I think that's a lesson for everyone. It's
Yeah.
Like find maybe using your hand to
Yeah.
find your 5 core things.
and say yes to those things, and then it's not like you can't say yes to other things, but it sure does make it easier to say no.
Yeah.
Check in with yourself. Is this part of my personal mission statement, or is it not? If it's not, it maybe you're going to get distracted from these other things that you have. You have one life. This
Yeah.
is not a dress rehearsal. We don't get to do this again.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? Do that.
Yeah. I wonder, just in hearing that from you, thinking about why I'm sitting here with you right now at this space I'm in, I wanted to start something that would allow me to go and engage and then have these meaningful conversations. That's always been at my core.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I have had the opportunity because I work for myself and like people see me drive by in this crazy looking big beast of a truck and all these things and they think I've got it all figured out. It's like, no, I've got $500,000 in debt, like I'm just pulling it together,
We're
and
all like that.
we're all like that, but visually like it can be like confusing, but it's like, no, I'm still trying to figure it out. I have no clue, but I have the key things for me is like my family, number one. Like I've met the love of my life. We're gonna give birth to a baby, in July.
It's exciting.
It's the most exciting thing ever.
Yeah.
And when I met Callie, I had this opportunity to become a father immediately with this incredible Ruby, was 3 years old at the time, and she's just like, we are just like totally like
Kindred
thick as
souls. Yeah.
thieves. Yeah, we go off on these adventures, and whether we're ripping jet skis or 4-wheelers or biking down the Heritage Trail and doing wild and crazy stuff. Like she's my co-pilot for that, but we're both high energy and she's intelligent as can be. She's so smart and just easy to hang out with. So as that's opened up for me, but just the desire to go and play and work with my hands and work with other people. And I don't know why, but I've always had this thing with buildings and like architecture and I think that's been embedded in me. But sometimes you get an identity put on you, I think, and maybe you can speak to that, like with the publishing or being in that world. And I don't know how much writing, and how much that really is part of you now.
Yeah.
Like it seems like you've shifted a little bit from that.
I have, but I have. We were talking about dreams earlier, so like Convivium is a great dream, but I have more dreams.
Yeah.
This is just one chapter in my life. I really, you had sent me a little list of pre-questions, and one of them was something like, when did you know that you wanted to write or whatever?
Yeah.
And I can tell you exactly. I know how this started in my life. I read this book when I was a kid. It's a classic kids book. It's called Harriet the Spy.
Okay.
All right. And I so identified with this little girl. It's a really old book. It's like written in the 50s or 60s. It's really old. And she would go around the neighborhood and take this little notebook, and she'd have this notebook and she'd take observations of everybody going on. And because, I'm a little bit of a dork, I did that.
Okay.
I did that as a little kid, but I don't know how long that lasted. But like I remember doing it. And then I would go home and I made this office in this old closet that we had. And I sat in there and I wrote all of these stories about people. I made up characters and I like wrote down all these stories and about so-and-so and this and that and, all of this stuff. And that's where it started for me. And it started about story, about communicating story. And I look now at my life, especially my dad in particular. I think it's a cultural thing. Storytelling is a very it's either in our family on the Shalabi side or it's just a general Arab trait, but that's how things are communicated,
Yeah.
is through story. So and so did this and that. There's just a lot of storytelling, and so it was a natural thing that came to me, is the
Yep.
storytelling. So as I look beyond, as I look into the next chapter of my life, that's what I want to do. I want to use these experiences that I've had, good and bad,
Yep.
through this process, and try and help others learn and communicate, or learn through story.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's going to look like. It's a very nebulous idea at this point, but I am very much looking forward to this time when I can quiet myself and reflect. And that season isn't there now. I'm still building.
Yeah, you're still hustling. Yeah.
I'm still hustling, and I'm learning through that, and every day learning. But that's the next thing for me. I want to get back to that. I want to start my life with words and end it with words.
So you're living it, and I think being a Gen Xer, just tumbling into things and seeing where it goes is like kind of at your core.
It is, yeah. There isn't a lot. I mean, I shouldn't say there isn't a lot of fear. There is fear, but I understand, for me personally, how to navigate that. I actually kind of like leaning into that and pushing through that.
So a couple of questions before we end this. I want to just say, pretend you're speaking to somebody who's watching this right now, and they somehow, because this gets shared a million times, because it's, you and your Convivium tribe of amazing people, but somebody who's like on the fence about wanting to jump into this community of Dubuque and become, they're curious about food and agriculture and the things that could be, happen here. Like what would your advice be to a younger person who's just like not sure where they want to go and why?
Move here and get involved. I mean, that's what I did. I moved here and I instantly got involved in the community. It was what I was missing in Madison. So within 3 weeks of living here in Dubuque, I was on 3 different boards, and that is what connected me to the community. I met so many people that way. I had a lot to offer. I have a skill set in marketing and writing, and all of that. I had a lot to offer. And I think if we look inside, we all have something to offer.
Yeah.
And so by jumping in at that level, I was immediately rooted to this community, and it embraced me back, and this feels like home to me. It feels like home. And that happened like that. But I had to put myself out there, I had to take the first step. So it's an affordable place to be. It's there's a lot happening in the food and agricultural scene here, a lot. There's a lot of opportunity in that area, and come and check it out.
Cool. Okay. And now on a different note, because one of the things I think that the theme that I've seen in your life is like you've had some stretches of success, and you've also like more recently gone through a lot. We swooped past some of it, but you've gone through a really I'd say midlife changing.
I mean, it's been
like a lot of really difficult things, losing both your parents in a short period of time, ending a relationship that was a beautiful and incredible growth, beautiful period for both of you, like going through all of that and probably seeing some darker times during that. Like, and I asked this probably selfishly because I've gone through like a little dark spell recently. And like, what is your advice to somebody who's not feeling at their core or at their best in this moment?
I'm 52. I've had periods in my life that have been the highest of highs, and periods of my life that have been the lowest of lows. And what I've learned is the highest of high comes after the lowest of lows. It's proportional, and you just have to sit with the shit. I'm sorry. I mean, I don't know how to say it other than
like
that.
A bumper sticker.
You can't numb it. You can't change it. It's going to flow, and you just have to sit there. And the more you allow yourself to feel those bad feelings, the faster they flow through you. And the more opportunity comes for those highest of highs. And that's what I've learned. And it's really hard because we want to resist all of that bad stuff. We just want to resist it because who wants to feel bad? None of us do. I don't want to feel bad either. No. And we do all these kinds of things. We work too much. We drink too much. We fuck too much. There's just all of these things that we do to stop that from happening.
Yep.
And what I've learned is you're not going to outrun that. In fact, it just snowballs the more that you don't face it.
Yeah.
So learn to be uncomfortable, and it's okay to not be okay. It is okay to not be okay. No one guaranteed us a straight ride this whole time along. Like that's part of life. Having downs and having sadnesses is part of who we are. And so just to know that, no, it's not, it's temporary. It's not always going to be like that. It isn't going, you're not always happy. You're not always sad. It shifts, it flows, and that's what life is. So just accept that. I say that so easily, but learn to accept that.
Yeah.
And your life will be a lot smoother.
Interesting. That's yeah. I ask you that because I find you to be so wise, and you've lived a big life, and you're a big personality, and you have so much more to live and give. So that's exciting. So, anything else that you'd like to share? Any other wisdom you'd like to share?
Shared a lot.
That's
I'm
big.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me here, Kyle. It's
This
fun.
is
I've never had anybody ask me these questions before, so
Well,
it's
it's
really cool to be able to share about myself at this level. So thank you.
I'm learning too. Like this is a process. This is the whole intention of this putting this together is to have these kinds of conversations. And I think the more we get equipped to do more of these conversations, I'm blessed to have, David in my life to help me with this. And it allows for the opportunity to do that. I think this does a lot for you. It does a lot for me. And it hopefully does a lot for others in our community. I mean, that's the goal. That's the intention.